Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're doing very well today. Welcome to my AMA Part 1. We're probably going to do this in 3 parts, maybe 2 in video form, and the 3rd in written form as a Patreon exclusive, because there are so many questions I've got to answer, but thank you so much for submitting all the questions. This ought to be fun, this ought to be really interesting, and thank you above all to Mr. Vladislav Jurenka, our Of the Veil tier, very generous Patreon supporter whose idea this was and whose request this was. So you're looking at the announcement comment that I made on my most recent video, and we also have a couple sample questions from Mr. Jurenka that not only gave people maybe a guidepost in terms of what types of questions to ask, but also need to be answered in and of themselves. So thank you for watching. Thanks to everybody once again who asked a question, or 5 or 10, as the case may be. And let's start here with our donor's question. Why did you start the channel? Well, couple different factors playing into this here. Number one, I was a big paper player, but I don't really live around my Magic friends anymore, and I don't really live around a store either. The nearest one is over an hour away where I can play any Magic at all. So as I got seriously into Modern, I eventually came to accept that, I kind of have to play online if I'm going to want, if I want to develop any kind of real expertise. And right around the time that Guilds of Ravnica was being spoiled, I was, dabbling in a few different archetypes, including Abzan midrange, but I was not wedded necessarily to the White Splash per se. I just liked the BGx playstyle in general, and then Trophy got spoiled, and the Modern community went crazy. I don't know if any of you remember this, but a lot of people were saying this was going to be so busted in half. Decks are going to be splashing their missing color to play this. Everybody's going to be playing these 2 colors. Others saying it's completely unplayable. The downside is reprehensible. It is disgusting. You will never play Assassin's Trophy in a competitive Modern deck. And of course, there were some in between across the spectrum, and I was fascinated by this discussion. Already a BGx player, but a new one. And I decided, you know what? I want to be the one who figures out whether Trophy is good or not before everybody knows. So I kind of decided to stop dabbling so much and focused on BGx, started doing a lot of research, and part of my research led me to find that there wasn't that much BGx content out there on YouTube, especially given the popularity of the archetype as a whole, and very little for Rock specifically. I ended up getting really into Rock, cutting the White Splash, at least for a while. I eventually, of course, returned to playing Abzan on this channel, but I focused only on Rock for a while, and I've always been, relatively confident in my speaking abilities as an adult anyway, and with all these factors, I'm starting to play online, I don't have a local scene, there's maybe a dearth of BGx content, I'm hyped for the archetype in the wake of Assassin's Trophy. One thing led to another, and I said, you know what, if there's not that much content out there, maybe I can make some of it, and that's kind of how I decided to get going. Vladislav also wants to know, what decks do you believe we should play in order to become better players? So if you are new or new enough to Modern, or your experience in Modern has been narrow enough that you have not played all of these 4 major strategies as outlined by this Wikipedia article, you should do that. That's the first and most important thing you should do. You should get a lot of games under your belt with an aggro deck, because that lets you be in the position of, I'm putting the pedal to the metal, I am asking the questions, I am forcing my opponent to answer them. It is a very useful mentality to have. It also behooves you to play a lot of games at the opposite end of the spectrum with control. With control, you have to maybe sacrifice your early game, only doing enough to stay alive, for the benefit of a very powerful late game. You have to decide what things you can let through and what things you have to answer at all costs. You also have to know a little bit about your opponent's deck, probably, to have any kind of a chance of operating optimally. And that, of course, we also have the combo. Combo, kind of the outlier of the 4. It's maybe most like aggro, just in philosophically in that you're asking the questions, but ultimately combo decks are a completely different animal from the other 3, in that you're often playing a lot of cards that do absolutely nothing realistically for you on their own, but when you put them together in the right way, you can win the game on the spot. Definitely owe it to yourself to play some combo games in order to be a well-rounded Modern player, and Midrange kind of brings aggro and control together, in that you're kind of somewhere in between the 2, And against various opponents, you'll have to adopt either the role of the aggressor or of the control player, the control or beatdown question, as it has been phrased. So you need to play some kind of mid-range deck. You need to play some kind of combo deck. You need to play some kind of control deck. You need to play some kind of aggro deck sometime in your Magic career. Beyond that, more specifically, I recommend that you get direct reps in, or maybe against if you have a friend that can walk you through it, any deck that gives you problems that you consistently cannot beat. Maybe it's just a bad matchup, but maybe there's something you're missing, right? Or, even more importantly, decks that you don't know how they work exactly. For me, most recently, it was the Oops All Spells deck. I knew it was coming. I kind of knew how it worked. I knew the general idea. Some things are obvious, like, Balustrade Spy, they mill the whole deck because there's no actual lands in the deck. Okay, fair enough. But more specifically, when precisely to disrupt their graveyard if you only have one Scooz activation, or if you only have one Nile Spellbomb activation. So I maybe played against it suboptimally once or twice, and then I said, you know what, I'm just going to get behind the stick. So I got a couple of reps in with Oops All Spells and said, okay, I understand how this deck works. And now maybe not the most relevant anymore, because Simian Spirit Guide has been banned, but you understand the point, especially if it's an unorthodox deck, and you find yourself at a knowledge disadvantage because you don't know precisely how to disrupt it. You should play with or against it for sure. Beyond that, again, you want a well-rounded experience where you have the ability to understand the mentality and the broad strategic role of aggro, combo, mid-range, and control. Goat Shield wants to know, starting off with the Discord questions, what do you think is a better or healthier format, Modern or Legacy? I have to kind of punt this question because I just don't have the Legacy experience to really say. I've dabbled once or twice, I've never played it seriously or extensively. That said, if you look at the most played cards in Legacy right now, I would say that Surgical Extraction is the literal most played card, is a pretty huge red flag to me. But beyond that, if you look at that, it's like, okay, there's a lot of interaction, there's some cantrips as you would expect. It actually looks relatively healthy. The creatures, Plague Engineer is definitely a hoser. The fact that it's the most, the top creature is maybe indicative of a slightly warped format. We all know the problems with Uro. If you look beyond those, Brazen Borrower, Delver of Secrets, Collector Roof, again, a main deckable hate card, I guess, but still. Scavenging Ooze at number 6. Snapcaster Mage, these are some pretty healthy cards, so I have to pump the question. I don't know for sure, but looking at the most played cards in Legacy has actually got me relatively optimistic for it. Now, that said, I think Modern is also in a better place than it has been for a while, so maybe a good problem to have. I'm going to pump the question in the comments. You let me know which is a healthier and better format. Running Griffin wishes to know, are there other formats that have any of your interest, / what would make these other formats of interest to you if they are not already? Well, I, as you may know, am completely constricted by time. I have felt relatively unrewarded, although I don't regret doing so, for trying to explore other formats. It's just not realistic for me. It is and all I can do to keep up with my obligations and my knowledge with Modern. I've got to accept that's my lane. I'm going to stay in it until I win the lottery and have a lot more free time, right? But beyond that, I think my second most favorite format is Pauper. Things I love about Pauper include the very low price, the fact that there's all kinds of awesome old borders flying around, and the fact that elves are strong. At least they were last time I looked into Pauper anyway. And the Pauper Elves deck is great, and to me it's a real microcosm of how Pauper is, because it's a relatively low-powered format. Only commons, right? But there's a lot of really powerful cards like Priest of Titania, Birchlore Rangers in this list alone, right? And so to me, the Pauper exists in a pretty sweet spot. Now, that said, again, I don't feel especially rewarded for having tried to delve into it too much because I just don't have the time to become an expert. Games in Pauper are also pretty long, so that's just another reason time is a constraining factor for me. But if I had more time, I think Pauper would be right up my alley. Fighter Escort asks, how did you get into MTG? Well, I think I have my timeline correct here. It might be a year or two off, but I think I was in 3rd grade, And I think 4th edition was out. I don't know if it was exactly new, but it was at least new enough to be on the shelves, and it was out, right? It was released, it was in stores. And at the mall there was a gaming store that I always loved as a kid and well into my teenage years. A lot of stuff caught my eye there. Board games, Warhammer, all the stuff caught my eye. Magic the Gathering, though, even in 3rd grade, I had some concept of money. Magic seemed a little bit more affordable. So one day, I basically asked my parents if they would be willing to buy me some Magic cards, and I ended up buying a starter set. And I don't think, but I could be wrong, but I don't think it was an official product. I'm going to scroll through some of these 4th edition black cards because you guys know I bought the mono black starter deck as it should be. I'm sure they just kind of, if it was a local thing, maybe they just repackaged a bunch of black commons basically. I know that a lot of these cards I do remember. Bog Imp, Bog Wraith. Was Black Knight in there? I'm not sure. Drain Life was definitely in there. Drudge Skeletons, 1000% was in there. Frozen Shade. So we had a lot of strong, obviously amazing OP, really cool old cards in there, right? But yeah, basically this came with a rule book. I taught myself how to play. I taught my friends how to play. We definitely didn't play correctly, but we were very young. And from there, we were in and out of Magic for a very long time, but this is how it all got started. I saw the power of the mono black 4th edition starter deck, and I could not resist. Mirabito asks, favor? Favorite paper tournament story? Well, I have a pretty good one. As I said earlier, I don't really have a local, so I've gone in different directions to play at different stores before I became enfranchised online. Maybe 2 or 3 times actually, I drove relatively far to meet up with some good friends who, at their local gaming store. And on one of these occasions, I ended up trading in some cards and ordering some cards from that store. Came back at another time. I was supposed to play Mill that night, and I was ordering some Glimpse the Unthinkables, which were actually pretty expensive back then, and there was a mix-up at the store. Very disappointing, but I came back, and they said, sorry, we don't have your Glimpses because X, Y, and Z, but look, we'll mail them to you because we know you're from out of town. Give us your mailing address, and we'll also give you a pack of Eternal Masters as a way to say sorry. So I said, okay, I appreciate that gesture, fair enough, let's open the pack. We get a Jace the Mind Sculptor, which at the time I think was in the 3 figures. I think it was a really expensive pull. At least it was very close to that, right? And there was also a foil Young Pyromancer, which now is, I think, worth about $1.50 because it's been reprinted. But at the time, I think that was a $10 card too. So needless to say, that was pretty exciting. I believe I ended up playing Elves instead of Mill that night and still had a solid 3-1, if I recall correctly. So all in all kinds of fun. It was a fun tournament, a fun night overall, and we got some really sweet pulls out of a free pack. Can't hate that. Jag asks, whether it be a favorite meta, your best time playing a deck, tournament stories, what have been your favorite moments throughout your Magic journey? So, I have had a lot of great moments since I started this channel. I've had some pretty cool moments at paper tournaments too, but my favorite moments date back to the origin story that I just mentioned about 4th edition, mono black, and in the maybe 4 or 5 years after that. I'm talking about elementary school into early middle school years. This is the time, guys. This is the time to be alive. It's a time to be immersed in a game. There is nothing like being a young kid, finding all these cards for the first time, reading them, looking at the art, reading the flavor texts, taking them home after digging through the 5-cent bin for a few cards that you could afford, and building decks out of nothing with no knowledge, totally innocent of the broad meta. A lot of our hobbyist endeavors as adults, they probably try to recreate that magic of childhood, especially with games in childhood. I don't think we ever really can, sadly, but for me, those memories are very strong, very vivid, and very meaningful. So as much as I love what I'm doing now, it can't beat back then. Nothing can beat back then. From Burn Toaster, why Jund is Junding people? Well, because that's what Jund does. Jund is just gonna Jund and you can't change it. It is math, it is science, it is an iron law of existence. Jund will Jund until the sun burns out, but for a more Serious answer, it is because of Ren and 6, actually. When I started the channel, Rock was, for a little while, the biggest share BGx deck out there. It had a bigger share than Jund, and than any other 3-color BGx deck for that matter, but Modern Horizons 1 changed all of that, and it brought other tools, right? It definitely brought other tools. Maybe some red cards became more well-positioned. It brought Seasoned Pyromancer to Jund, but Ren and 6 is really what put it a step above Rock, and it has more or less remained there since then, right? Obviously, neither is strictly better than the other, but Ren and 6, I think putting Jund back on the map, without this card, would Jund have anywhere near the meta share it's managed to since MH1, even though it's had its highs and lows? I kind of doubt it. So, yeah, Ren and 6, definitely a core component of why Jund is Junding these days. Crushinator asks, what one card would you design to make the Rock relevant in Modern again? And oh, the phrasing is so painful. The Rock is relevant, okay? It just is. Actually, it kind of is, right? We've had some decent results lately. I covered that in the Lurus Theory video, but either way, I do understand the question, of course. And I've actually talked about this before. I think it would be a fixed Deathrite Shaman, and let's look at my quick little mock-up here that I've used before. It is Deathrite Mystic. We have basically toned down the splashability and therefore the ubiquity by making it cast green, only cast off of green rather. The casting cost is G rather than a hybrid black or green. And you tone down the mana production, the color capabilities here, because when we exile a land card from a graveyard, we are making only black or green rather than the entire spectrum of the rainbow. And that in and of itself, I think, is sufficient to make Deathrite Shaman viable in Modern, fair in Modern, and also useful in Modern. Deathrite Shaman is too pushed, it is too extreme, it is too ubiquitous, or it would be if it were legal in Modern, but that type of effect, that type of flexible kind of Swiss Army knife, incremental value, main deckable hate, that's the exact type of design that is healthy for Modern and can help keep other things in check without running roughshod over the format if we tone it down a little bit. You could also tone it down even further by maybe reducing the life loss from 2 to 1. You could also, of course, design in a million different directions from here and make tweaks, but if you want to stay as true to DRS as you can while making it fair for Modern, I think it would be this, and I think it would specifically put Rock on the map because this is a classic mid-range card, but it only thrives as a total free roll in Rock. Every other deck, it is an imperfect fit-in for one reason or another. In Rock, it is a slam dunk, so yeah, this is what I would design. A good old Deathrite Mystic or 4 in every Rock deck. Burn Toaster is back with a sequel question. Where is the terms when Jund them out? When in doubt, Jund them out, excuse me. Where did that come from? So why is Jund Junding, and then what is the origin of when in doubt, Jund them out? Well, I don't actually know. So I looked it up, and I actually really like this explanation from a Reddit thread. I will read verbatim. The Jund Shard of Alara is all about survival of the fittest and ruthless power. Fittingly, Modern Jund has very little synergy between individual cards, nothing tribal, rarely combos, just the best cards in your colors for that slot in your deck. When in doubt, Jund 'em out means if you're not certain, fall back on magic fundamentals, powerful cards, aggressive creatures, efficient removal, and maybe I could quibble with a thing or two here or expand upon others, but as far as a concise raison d'etre for the Jund archetype and the Jund mentality as a whole, this is really good. I co-sign this for sure. Not Tyler wishes to know, what is the best flavor of Pop-Tart? Bruh, I don't know, but you're going to make me go to poptarts.com to figure it out, because I'll tell you, it's been about 15 years since I've had one. Fan faves, new, limited time, bites and crisps, what is all this stuff? View all. Okay, can't decide, click here and see them all, sure. You've made me go to poptarts.com. I hope you're happy, not Tyler. So, the new stuff, see, I already hate these. Haven't had them, never will, already hate them. Salted caramel, red velvet cupcake, you just know these are way too sweet. They're for people whose taste buds have already been obliterated long ago, and they're just trying to feel something. Anything at all, right? Lemon Groove, pink lemonade, oh my goodness, no thank you. It's gonna be a classic for me. Back in my day, there weren't that many flavors, although I do recognize some of these, like brown sugar cinnamon. I think I had that as a kid, didn't like it. The stuff that's like too chocolatey or too, it has to be a fruit flavor, otherwise it's like you could be eating anything. Pop-Tarts, to me, a true Pop-Tart is a solid fruit flavor, just like this frosted blueberry. I think these are fine. That right now, so far, that's my pick. Not going to go for anything like cookie dough or hot fudge again. Like cookies and cream, this you might as well be eating an Oreo, right? Frosted raspberry, I think, is probably pretty good. And the unfrosted, yeah, no thank you. I know I've dunked on the overly sweet things, but if you're eating a Pop-Tart, let's have some frosting, please. S'mores, nah. Unfrosted, Wildlicious, I don't think we're gonna, Fruit Loops, yuck. I don't think we're gonna see anything else here. But we do see frosted strawberry, and that is definitely a big contender. Now, I think it's gonna come down to whether or not it's toasted. And it should be toasted. If you're eating a Pop-Tart cold, what is wrong with you? You got to put it in the toaster. I think strawberry is the best of the classic flavors when toasted, when warm. You might say raspberry or blueberry is a little better if you're eating cold, but if you've done that, you've already made a mistake. So I have to choose frosted strawberry classic flavor for my Pop-Tart number one. All right, 3 questions from maybe Lotus's Dan. I've already kind of answered the bottom one. If I had more time to play Magic for fun, it'd probably be Pauper. The only thing I'll add to that is if I had friends to play casually over the kitchen table with any format, I would love to do that too if I had more time. When will Grim Tidings continue? I don't know, probably if I need a new phone. If I need to upgrade my phone anytime in the near future, then I will revisit Grim Tidings. I decided against acquiring a microphone for my current phone, and without the microphone, the volume isn't very good, the visuals are only okay. I also don't know that I really love being on camera, I'll be honest, but if somebody requests a Grim Tidings for a donation video or something, I'll probably do that. Otherwise, I guess they're on hiatus until, again, maybe I have to upgrade my phone, and then we'll see how the sound and the visuals and all that look when recording on a phone that is maybe a little bit better than my by now ancient one. So we'll take a rain check for now on Grim Tidings until further notice. And Dan also wants to know your top 5 most fun and or most memorable videos since starting the YouTube channel, and I have to give kind of a cop-out answer, but it's also my actual answer. It is the group of 5 videos that represented the league that was my first ever live recorded league. So when I was very new to the channel, I was uploading one-off matches, and they were in replay form. And my viewers, who were relatively few at the time, started saying, hey, this is cool, but when are you going to start doing some live recorded stuff? So I started doing live recorded stuff by way of a competitive league, but I was still only uploading one at a time. I would play a game, record it, upload it, and then play another one the next day. That's how I did it at the time. And my first ever live recorded league, it was a competitive league. It was uploaded one at a time, so there is a lot of suspense, and I was fortunate enough to 5-0. I got lucky, I'm sure. Haven't looked back at the gameplay, I'm sure it was kind of ugly. I was newer at the time, plus I was first time commentating while playing, right? But we were lucky enough to 5-0. We did take down some heavy hitters along the way, too. And on top of that, I was on a shoestring budget. I only had 3 Lilianas of the Veil. Partially that was a meta call, partially I didn't own the 4th, and I was happy enough to make that meta call, partially because the 4th was kind of expensive for me at the time, but in my chests from the 5-0, I also opened the 4th Liliana, so that is actually why my Lilies mismatched to this day, and therefore, it was just such a good omen for me. I was like, alright, I'm meant to do this. If we get the 5-0 in a competitive league first time out ever, let's go, live recorded, right? So that was definitely, those are my favorite ones. You can't really top that, if you ask me. Bobby wants to know if you didn't have a Magic channel, what would be the next most likely thing you would make content on? And I could see myself going in a couple different directions. If I wanted to leverage the experience I have here and do something that reaches a much broader audience, I think I could do that now. And I think there would be some scope to branch out into gaming with a huge audience, with and stuff that has overlap with real world stuff, maybe sports games, maybe like FIFA would be something in this regard, that the game itself is huge, the sport itself is huge, I could do something with both. I am into the sport of soccer, the sport of football. I do know a lot about the history of it, for an American anyway, and I could also see myself making content on that. That would be pretty cool. I could also see myself going in the complete other direction, doing like really esoteric deep dives into niche fantasy realms that I have some knowledge of. Maybe do some Diablo 2 streaming, stuff like with a very low audience potential, but that would really tickle my fancy. Right now, I have no plans to do any of these things because I enjoy what I'm doing here and it's all I have time for, but I would have to pick a lane. I would have to either go big or go niche, and I don't exactly know right now, Bobby, which one it would be. Chevalier asks, which card for you creates the strongest feeling of nostalgia and why? Well, I can't pick just one. I tried to think of just one. There is not one that is head and shoulders above the others. Again, it is about the era. It's about the time of my life, the age I was. It's cards from that era, so I'll show a few. Fittingly enough, for Chevalier, we'll show a knight. This also harkens back to my 4th edition starter thing, that I don't remember if it had Black Knight, but Black Knight is a black 4th edition card. The only thing as cool as Black Knight is White Knight. I used to play a lot of both of these cards at that age at the kitchen table. You love to see him. I also used to play a ton of Hymn to Torok. I'll give that a special mention here because it's a card when I have played a tad bit of Legacy, I've encountered. It's a card I've speculated on recently as to whether it could be okay for Modern, and probably not, but still it's worth speculating on for me. And it's a card that I played the ever-loving crap out of back in the day, definitely right along the lines of what this channel is all about with the depletion and all the rest too. And the final card I'll mention for nostalgia lane purposes is Gerard of the Closed Fist, because after I bought that mono black 4th edition starter deck, the next Magic card I bought, and I saved up my allowance for this guy because he was a pricey card for whatever reason at the time, was the Gerard of the Closed Fist, vanilla 6/5 for 6, totally out of the colors I was in. I hadn't finished reading the rulebook yet, or hadn't finished understanding the rules, but he was too cool to resist. Look at that flavor text, look at that art. I'm all about it, no regrets whatsoever, but every time I see this card, it does bring a smile to my face because of that. Uro Love, and we hate to see the name, but we know the name's ironic, so it's okay. Uro Love says, if you had a one-off opportunity to ban any number of cards from Modern, what cards would you choose? Well, Veil of Summer. Veil of Summer, no matter what else is going on, put this in my will. Veil of Summer is banned. If I'm bequeathed power of bans and unbans after I've become demented, in my 90s or something, put it down right now. You're all witnesses. Veil of Summer has to get banned no matter what else happens. Beyond that, I actually see scope to ban more aggressively, but I would really need to know what the next couple years of design look like. Are we going to get an MH2 that's on the power level of MH1? Are we going to get 2022 sets that were on the power level of 2019-2020 sets? If those things, the answers to those are yes, then we might as well leave cards like Teferi Time Raveler and dare I say even Wrenn and 6 in the format. But if we are kind of repudiating the Fire Design era, if we are kind of returning things to a pre-2019 normal, then maybe I would ban a lot more aggressively, but I would really need to know that. And once again, no matter what else is going on, what else I do or do not do, Veil of Summer, getting that X. Kami with a pair of questions. First one, outside of the BGx archetype, what are some of your favorite cards and decks to play with? Well, I've already said elves. Elves in any format, as long as they're not unplayable. Feels bad to, set them up just to get knocked down is what I'm trying to say, to get your elves roasted at every turn. But if they're viable, I love to play elves in any format. Just a very immersive, pleasing tribe to me. Very explosive turns you can have. Very interesting synergies with deck building and all the rest. I also love the Prowess archetype. Is cool. I appreciate it. I like what it brings to the table. It's probably my least favorite overall. I like mono red better. I like black red better, and I have high hopes for Boros or Lorehold Prowess in the new set. I'm definitely going to try some of that out. I like playing Ad Nauseam before they banned it, and I also have really grown to love the Shadow decks. Now that we have Scourge of the Skyclaves for Shadow 5 through 8, I find the deck very appealing, and, it is different enough to mention from BGx there. Kami also wants to know, what deck in Modern do you look at and think, why on earth are they playing that? And to me, probably the most emblematic is a Yorion pile. But anything in the same category could probably apply here to that question, but maybe to a lesser degree. But the thing with the Yorion piles is they're disordered inherently because there are 80 cards in them, and they are also, in order to max out Yorion, playing all kinds of ETB effects, all kinds of blink value, and basically it's just a gigantic value pile that you don't have that much control over as far as you're finding the right cards when you need them. And you're just kind of hoping the opponent is trying to interact with you so you can blow them out with ephemerates and so you can just naturally outgrind them because everything in your 80 card deck is a 2-for-1. But this deck has no hope whatsoever of policing linear strategies in a way that is as effective as a more traditional and focused mid-range or control deck, right? So for that reason, I resent Yorion. Like, we are the good guys of the format trying to keep everybody in check. They're the bad guys of the format hoping they run into us and get a free win. So that's what I don't like. I do understand the appeal of designing an 80 card deck optimally. That's an interesting challenge and it's something different. But beyond that, this type of thing, not for me. DeMarcus with a great question. What is the best thing you have seen come from the community you have fostered? Honestly, not just saying this, there are so many things it's really hard to remember, much less remark upon all of them, but I know that for a lot of people are socially isolated, especially these days. Maybe they would be even without lockdowns and so forth. A lot of people have come out of their shells socially as a direct result of participating in this Discord or in this community as a whole. I have also had some really heartfelt messages from people along those lines, and it just means the world to me. Any way I can help people, even if I didn't know I was helping them until they told me, that really just makes it all worth it. It's a cliche, but it's so true. We also have we've had some really unique things go down on this Discord specifically. We've had people lending each other cards online. We've had some trades and some sales. We've had people giving each other arena codes. This type of camaraderie is amazing. We've even had Gold Sabertooth give a lot of the last copies of his book that he's published to people in the Discord. Like, it's just incredible. I think if I have to pick one thing, though, it would be the tournaments. I am just amazed by how well run, how the community runs itself, basically, with these tournaments. I don't have much of a hand in them. I kind of swoop in at the end to do a little commentary, do my uploading thing, but the community is so healthy and so reasonable and so well-intentioned that these tournaments just go off without a hitch most of the time, and they've got good participation rates and very generous prizes people have put up as well. So from a strong pool of contenders, I think the tournaments are probably the single best thing I've seen come from the community, but if you got all day, I could talk much, much longer about all the great things we've seen. Alright, we'll pick up the thread of the Discord comments in the second video. For now, let's pivot to YouTube. TNT Colonel wants to know, is your love of rock limited to MTG, or does the Grimflayer, TM, also listen to and enjoy rock music? What about other rock-associated stuffs and disciplines like geology, mineralogy? Well, you know, I do respect rocks. One of my daughters actually collects rocks like a fiend. Every time she goes outside, she stuffs her pockets full. So it runs in the family. I do, of course, enjoy rock music as well. Obviously that's a broad umbrella term. I guess most people do if it's just like, do you like any kind of rock music? But yeah, it is my favorite genre of music on the whole. And we try to live the lifestyle, right? So I do just about everything shy of eating rocks, I suppose. And maybe one day we'll have to start that too. Gotta get really immersed in the lifestyle, right? Next up, we have a huge amount of questions from Dylan. I will try to answer some or all of these. Some of them I have already answered. How did you get into Magic? We already talked about that. What is the top of your MH2 wish list? I have a whole series about this. What do you feel like BGx needs the most right now? It would probably be a fixed Deathrite Shaman, like I said earlier in this video. What is your favorite Magic card in each color? You know, I've never actually thought about this one, so I'm going off the top of my head here. It would be Liliana of the Veil in black. That's the first thing that comes to mind. In green, it does probably have to be Tarmogoyf, although these days it is a little bit close with a few other things. In red, I have come to love Lightning Bolt. I have come to absolutely love Lightning Bolt, even though I used to be kind of an anti-red person. I do do just love, love, love Lightning Bolt, and as you can see, my focus here is mainly for Modern, and with that in mind, I don't really have a favorite Modern white card necessarily. Stoneforge Mystic is cool, but I don't know if I like her well enough to say that she's my favorite. Ditto Skyclave Apparition. How about I count Gaddock Teague as my favorite white card? I just absolutely love that guy. And as for blue, my favorite blue card is Snapcaster Mage. I love my couple forays into blue rock, right? And usually we're playing Snapcaster Mage. I like kind of playing with Snapcaster, generally speaking, even though blue isn't. Control decks are not my favorite thing to do. Snapcaster is a super cool card. More quick questions from Dylan. I know you lack the time, but have you ever thought about streaming leagues when you do play them? I do. My computer right now can't handle it, but I have a new computer. It's coming. And once I get these AMA videos done, I'll set it up and we'll see maybe about streaming a little bit to Discord to start things off, and then who knows, we'll take it from there. I do know though that a lot of people want me to keep doing the YouTube basically monologue narration instead of always talking to a stream chat as well. So if I do streaming, it will be mixed in with the regular content for sure. Do I have any intention of doing arena content? Yes, that's another thing I can't do on this old computer. I actually have a donation league kind of lined up for when I get my new computer set up. I'm going to borrow a patron's arena account, and we're probably going to play a few games in Historic. Beyond that, I don't really see myself getting into arena beyond the occasional thing. Definitely not going to grind the leagues. I'm, again, got to stay with Modern, but I'll play arena once my computer allows me to, once or twice, sure. Have you thought about collaborating with other content creators? And then Dylan says some nice things about how I'm underrated. I appreciate that, Dylan. And yes, Nikachu has asked me to be on a show, or maybe other people have asked on my behalf, and he's invited me. I had a recent invite from MTG Tavern. This is just another thing I need to get the new setup up and rolling and get caught up on other things, and then yes, I do intend to do that. How do I feel about renaming Jund to Almost Grizzly Bears? Well, I haven't watched this against the odds yet, but, you know, Almost Grizzly Bears? Yeah, I could get behind that. I could get behind that for sure. More questions here from GoatDB. I did already answer when I first started playing MTG, but when did I start playing competitively? It was basically right around the time my channel started, which was a few years ago now. I just attended a stray FNM or draft or two. Oh, only drafts, really, because I didn't even have a fixed format that I played at the kitchen table. So I maybe attended like 3 drafts in my entire life before I started my channel. With the channel, I started playing competitively. Were there any pros that influenced you to start playing competitively? Yes, absolutely Reed Duke, no question about it. I saw this guy's content, I saw how popular he was, and I said, that is somebody to look up to model myself after, and somebody who really gave me something to connect to in the game. I relate really strongly to Reed. And I think that speaks for itself. I don't think I need any advice pointers they gave you. I've never talked to him directly, right? But I think most people know what Reed Duke is all about. Secondly, do you have a favorite food and or a go-to beverage? I think I remember you saying you don't really drink, but if you do, favorite beer or cocktail. Well, I didn't drink at all for the year of 2020. I have since reintroduced it into my, week, maybe a couple drinks a week. About 2 is what I average. And if I have a favorite, I like drinking beer, but I don't like the kind of sluggish buzz it gives me. I like drinking cocktails a little bit better. Good old gin and tonic is good for me. I like dry stuff. I don't like sweet stuff, basically. That's where my head is at with that stuff. And as for food, I have a very proletarian palate, my friend. I love pizza. I love tendies. I love burgers. I am an American. I don't have a sweet tooth, but to the extent that I eat a lot of junk food, it's like chips and crackers and that type of thing too, right? So that's what gets me. What can I say? Just want to acknowledge this question from TK Darton. If you could design a BGX-oriented card for MH2, it would be that fixed Deathrite Shaman, Deathrite Mystic, as we covered earlier. From Kevman, question, what non-BGX midrange deck do you think is currently best positioned in the meta and why? Thanks for all the great content. Well, I have to mention the shadow decks. Maybe you don't consider them midrange. In the case of Jund, of course, it is kind of a BGX deck anyway if you do consider it midrange, so fair enough. Those are very well positioned though, especially Jund Shadow. For a more traditional midrange deck, I'm actually going to opt for Mardu. I think Mardu midrange is a little underrated despite being on the upswing. So my thinking here is that we saw how Rakdos midrange was the best positioned midrange deck in the tail end of the Uro meta, before all the bans happened. Mardu is basically picking up where Rakdos left off, although we don't need Blood Moon anymore. And that is the big reason to be Rakdos, and the big reason to stay away from a third color splashed in to Rakdos. But now we don't need Blood Moon anymore, we can add white. And as far as Jund is concerned, that's another way to look at this. Jund is now a base black or red deck with a splash for green. So the BRX deck is already viable with Jund. Why couldn't it be replacing green with white? And that's the idea here. You're getting Stoneforge Mystic, you're getting Kaya Orzhov Usurper, you're getting Path to Exile if you want that, you're getting Lingering Souls, Kaya's Guile, and let me remind you that we're getting a lot of potential playables in the Orzhov colors that can slot into this as well. So as far as Mardu is concerned, I think this is a relatively well-positioned deck. I think red and black have the good makings of a mid-range core for the foreseeable future, and again, that third color is definitely very, very playable right now. It can be green, but it can be white as well. Fanu Banu asks, what do you think of the old red Prowess list you ran in the past, and if you might be exploring the Prowess archetype again? I think the red Prowess lists are still really strong. Whenever I run into them in the leagues, at first I'm almost like, my first instinct is to say, oh, it's only mono red Prowess, right? As opposed to, is it, or whatever. But then when I actually play against it, I'm like, oh, yeah, man, it's mono red Prowess. They're really consistent. The gas just keeps on coming. Bedlam Reveler is still a bomb, right? So I still think mono red Prowess is great. I also advise it very strongly for somebody who thinks they might like it as a secondary deck, or as somebody who's maybe new to Modern, maybe on a budget. Mono red Prowess, you're very unlikely to be steered wrong by that as an entry point into the format. And yes, I will be exploring the Prowess archetype again, very eager to try my hand at Boros when the new set comes out. Well, there you go, my friends. So we left off with DeMarcus and the Discord, and then we finished the YouTube comments. But as you can see, there are way, way, way more questions to come here. I'm just scrolling briefly through them. If you want a preview for the upcoming questions, you can slow down and see those, right? But in the meantime, I will leave it there. Thank you for watching part 1 of the AMA. I'll see you for part 2.